So at each phone location, I'm going to have to install these 3 items. And I found that I would rather install these on a pre-wired board, something like this, because there's so many different connections to make under a layout that I'd rather have them corrected and checked above the layout first before I go underneath it where it's going to be harder to see. The items we have here is a buzzer, and what this does is it'll go off. Now I have it set up to go off just once to let the operator know that a call is coming in, because your operator is going to be focused on the layout. They won't be looking for this small light to come on at the phone. So this buzzer will help them know that the dispatcher wants to reach them. And what I understand is that there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can just have the buzzer go off once, or you can actually have it be cycling, like a beeping, until the phone is picked up. I opted for just the buzz to start out with, and if I find that they're not answering the phone, I guess I can upgrade and change that later. Then there's this small item here called a latch relay, and then what we have is called a speech network board. And this one here is going to have all the different connections that we have to make. There's a lot of wire connections on here. Now to make this easier under the layout, what I ended up doing was getting a couple terminal strips. This is the one that's going to come from the cup hook and the handset. And then this is the one that goes for the Cat 5 cable back to the main board. A better way probably to do this, if you really like to kind of be slick about the deal, would be to get receptacles for Cat 5 cables. You just have to remember that for example, coming from the handset, you need all of these connections, and so you have to make sure that you have, if you're going to use a Cat 5, of course you're going to use 2, and then you'll have to label which one's which. Another way would be a 10 conductor wire, and maybe a 10 pin plug would be a really nice thing. However, the hole going through the fascia is going to be a little harder to manage. What I opted for was just to use what I had in stock, which was Cat 5 cable and then another 4 conductor cable, and they will come from the handset and connect to this one. And then on this one, I'm just going to wire the Cat 5 cable into these different connections. And to keep it straight, what I've done is when I set these boards up is I use the same color wires from the Cat 5 cable. For example, the one coming from the board, they're the same colors across here. Even though I did label them here, as long as I make sure that, for example, on this one, the white blue comes in here and it's coming out here, everything's okay. So let's go ahead and set one of these up. This is I think it's a 6 by 7.5 foot piece of plywood. And I found that this layout here actually works pretty good. The other thing I'll be doing is I'll be making little pre-assembled wiring harnesses. And when I wired these up, what I found easiest to do is to just work on one component at a time on every board. That way I made sure the connections were going to the same place rather than doing all, I don't know what this is, there's probably 18 connections up here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll wire in the buzzer, then I'll wire in the Cat 5 on this side, then I'll make all the connections from the handset and the cup hook, and then the last one is here. We'll wire this one up. Now this one's actually missing one, and it's this one right here. So I've got to reinstall this wire, or install this wire on this one here. So if you're looking at this one, be aware that there is one connection missing here, but we'll see as I assemble one of these that I will make sure that that connection is on that board. So here's my plywood board, and the first thing I'm going to do is screw down the speech network board here with some number 10 screws. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the 6 conductor terminal strip on this side. The next thing I'm going to install is going to be the buzzer, and I found it goes good right about here because the wires can reach without splicing, and that's just installed with a couple small screws that were supplied with the buzzer. next thing I'm going to install is going to be this thing called the latch relay, and it came with these little standoffs here, and some longer screws. So I'm going to install that on here. And then the final thing will be this 12 terminal strip. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to hook up is the buzzer here. And what I found was easy to do is the system came with a full instruction manual on where all these connections go. But what I actually did is as I made this drawing, and I'll put a actual image up on the screen, but this allowed me to figure out where these wires are going when I'm using the Cat 5 wires, because I'm a real visual person, so it's easier for me to follow this than a chart. So it says here that the black one connects to E1 on the speech network, and the red one connects to E2. So the black one's going to go to E1, and I like to do, when I have this next to me, I like to put these in the same orientation here. So it says here that this is E1, and these are labeled down on there if you look in there. So I'm just going to hook up the black one to E1. And these might look like standard spade terminals, but they're not. They're smaller. And when I ordered this stuff, I was supplied with these things to install on my wiring harnesses. So I'm going to plug this one into E1. And what I like to do, what I found works on these is, so there's 4 plugs on each one of these terminals here, is you want to be careful. For example, if you plug the outer one in on E1 here, and you plugged in one on C here, you want to make sure that that they don't bend over and touch each other. So what you could do is, if you plugged it in like that, is you could bend these in a little bit, just to make sure that that one here that's kind of slightly leaning doesn't come and touch that one. And then of course we're going to put the red one over here onto E2, E2. Okay, so that's one component done. Now the next thing I'm going to hook up is I'm going to hook up this start here on the latch relay here, because I found that this one I forgot on all my boards and couldn't figure out why the LED was not lighting up on the phone. So you're going to just have a single wire to hook that up. And in this case, again, I'm following the wiring color system that was in the manual that was provided. And so I'll make up a wire for a single wire for E1, and I'm sorry, for the start here. And the start actually does go to E1. So we're going to be going from the E1 terminal here down to the start terminal on the latch relay. So I'll need a wire about that long. Now I was supplied with these terminals here. They're a self-piercing kind of spade terminal looking item here. And the way they work is you don't have to strip the end of the wire. You just stick it in there and then use a crimper here to go ahead and just crimp that wire in there, and it will pierce the insulation and make the wire be grabbed by the terminal strip there. The other thing I like to do is there's going to be so many wire connections here, is that what I prefer to do was, after I made these things, is I tested both ends to make sure. In my not being comfortable with this system and how all this works, I just wanted to make sure I was always doing it right, because if I was going to have an error, I didn't want my wiring to be the error. That'd be easier if I had plugged it into the wrong thing. So every time I made one of these little short assemblies here, I just checked all the ends, stripped the ends off of them, and made sure they all worked. And to check for that continuity, you don't need anything fancy. This was just a cheap meter I picked up. Just going to set it to the this continuity checker. It makes both a visual and a audio confirmation. And I'm just going to check both ends of my wire I made to make sure it works out. So there we go. That just makes you know that your wiring is not the issue if you have a problem. The other thing I find with these little screw terminals is I tend to have difficulty with these things because when you get these items, they're actually all the way lifted up, meaning that they're all the way tight. And so what I like to do with these is loosen these things quite a bit. And then you really want to make sure that you don't put these in under the part that's raising up and clamping them. So for example, if this was all the way tightened up, there's a little piece that's raised up, and if you stick this in here, it'll actually be below it. So I make sure to go plenty low enough, and then I put them towards the upper part of the hole, and then I tighten these down. The other thing you'll want to make sure you do is that you don't strip off too much insulation in here so that there's a big exposed piece of wire in there. You want just enough to make good contact in there. So I'll route this up and connect this to E1 where we already have this first black wire connected. And so I'm going to turn this around so that crimped part faces inside, and I'm going to push it in on E1. And we'll just make that go nice and out of the way. So the next thing I did was I made the connections for the Cat 5. Now, Cat 5 wire has 8 wires in it, but what we're going to be using is only 6 of them here. These other 2 green ones, I'm leaving them long out of the wire harness here because there may be someday where I may use those for something. I don't know. I guess we'll learn as I put this system in. So what I did here is I made this one for the board without those wires. So I took those out. So all I have is the orange, white, the orange, I guess the correct way to say this would be the white, orange, the white, blue, the white, brown, and the brown. Now, if you look in the manual, this one's actually called brown, white, and this one's blue, white, and this one's orange, white. But the Cat 5 I bought didn't have any white on here, but I guess they say that because I'm sure there's some that you buy that have mostly orange with a little white, and then this is mostly white with a little orange. But for me, none of my other colors had white on them. So when I did these boards, I labeled the colors on the side here, and I'm going to go ahead and label them again. So this is going to be and I did them all the same so that there wasn't any confusion. So this is going to be white, blue, and blue. And then this is going to be, white, orange. And this is orange. And then I'm going to do white, brown. And then brown. And then on this side, I'll just follow that color across and we'll get all these screwed on here. Now these terminal strips too, they also come screwed down. And so what I like to do is just go ahead and loosen them all to start. So with all the terminal strips loosened up, it's time to start running wires from this was coming from the telephone connector board. And you can even write that on there, like this is telephone connector board. So I think just call it the TCB. And then this is going to be the phone. And you know what? It's sometimes fun if you saw I was putting dates on these, so I'll put the date on these so you can look at them in the future. So the first one we're going to do is the white, blue, and the blue. Now a good thing to do here too would be to check continuity once again to make sure that you didn't somehow pinch the insulation or didn't insulate or didn't strip one and you forgot. So you can go through all these and quickly check them and at least take that out of the equation if you had a problem. It's much easier to check this stuff here than to check it under the layout. So those I'll check out. Now I will follow the wiring on these. And again, if I was doing multiple, which I did do multiple ones, I just saved one last one, is I did every one of these steps on this one, and then I moved to the next one, did the same thing. So every time I set one of these up, I did each thing one at a time because it helped me to stay focused, because there's a lot of connections here to do, and it just seemed it was easier to break it down into those steps here. So the very first thing I do is I'm going to hook up I'm just going to go down this list here, find the white blue, and the white blue from the Cat 5 connects to the RR on the speech network board. And then the solid blue one on my cable goes to the L2 terminal. And then I'm going to go down to the white orange, and that's going to go down to L1. So L1 is right here above RR. And then go down to the orange, and the orange one is going to terminal G, which is up in this corner here. And then we're going to go to white brown, and white brown goes to E1, which is up next to G. And the last one here is the brown one, which goes to E2. I'm going to go ahead and kind of bring this out of the way here. Okay, the Cat 5 on this one is now connected. The handsets come with the wires with these terminals already on them, and these will plug directly into the speech network board. But because I'm making self-contained boards here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make short little jumper wires that will plug into those same locations and then come over to this terminal strip, simply because that the way where I'm going to locate my boards and my handsets, they're actually farther than this cable is, and I would need to extend these anyways. If you don't do that, it's okay. You can just come through here and plug these in where they go. But again, I find that it's, for me, to keep this straight in the future, if I were to remove this system and move it to another layout, I'd rather have the colors and the locations labeled here, just in case I, for some strange reason, lose my diagrams and I can't find how all this went together. It'll just be simpler for me to have this assembled and then just undo connections and move it, and then just put those back in on the new installation. So what I'm going to do with these actually is I'm going to just cut these off of here, and then I will solder wires on to extend these. But you don't have to. Again, I'm just telling you that this is the way I found it easier for me to do. And then I want to reuse these again, because I solder these onto my wire harness that will go onto this board here. And so what I do is I just clip off the part that was crimped on here so that I have that piece, and then I will solder my wires right onto the middle of those. So now we're going to hook up the phone and the cup hook. And for that, I've made some short jumper wires here, and I've followed the same wire color coding as what's going to be coming in here. And you can see here, I've wrote those colors down on here. So this is going to come from the handset. This is coming from the cup hook. And then on this side, I actually wrote where they're going to be going to, both on the speech network here and on the relay board here. So I'm going to go ahead and follow these colors. So for this, I've made 4 short wires for the phone handset. And then the wires that go from the terminal strip to the relay board are pretty short. So I made a white green, a white brown, and a brown that are really short. And then the other ones that are going to be coming from the terminal strip up to the speech network are the blue set and the orange set, and then they're a little longer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to work my way down this list here, and we're going to start here with the red wire. red wire goes to terminal R, which is down here on the bottom. And then we're going to go to yellow. And yellow also goes to R. And we're going to do black. Now again, if you were coming from your handset and you didn't use this terminal strip, colors are the same and the connections are the same. You'd just be skipping this step here. So black is going to go to connection B. Okay, and then the last one from the handset would be green, which is going to go to connection GN. GN is all the way up here in this corner. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and just work down the colors here. So we're going to do the white, blue, and the blue. And then they're going to go, the white, blue is going to go to connection C, which is in here. Trying to stay out of the way of the camera here. And then the blue one goes to L2, which is this one right here. Now we're going to do the orange set. So the white, orange, and the orange. And the white orange goes to L1, which is this middle one here on the side. And again, this is where you want to see. I don't know if you can see that here, but when I was pushing into L2, it's tipped over and it's almost touching L1, and you definitely want to make sure that that's not happening. So let's bend that out of the way, and I'm going to bend this one a little bit in this way too. This is where I find that putting these on the board helps, because if I ran these wires at the layout, I may accidentally pull a wire which will pull one of these connections over. So by having these isolated on these boards, all my connections are made here and they're not affecting any of the wiring within this system here. So back to our white orange. Oops, see, I actually made a mistake there. White orange goes to L1. I grabbed the orange one accidentally, so let's put the white one over on L1. And then the orange one goes to G, and G is all the way up here. Okay, so verify white, orange, L1, true, orange to G, true. So now we're going to make the connection to the relay board, and for those we just need short pieces here. And the first one we're going to do is the white brown, and these have no spade connections on the end. And if you probably looked earlier in that video, you saw I had some on there, but I realized as soon as I had them on there I didn't need them. And so this one's going to go to the ground terminal on here. And again, for me, I want to make sure that these are all the way up, even on the ones I'm not using, because if for some reason, if I use a feature in the future, that's a kind of funny thing to say, I want to make sure that once this is installed under the layout that I can get at these things. So we're going to stick this in the ground and then tighten that down. Now what I'd like to do with these things is, after I tighten them, is to give them a little pull, because I have had it where I thought they were tight and these were not tight in there. So the next one is going to be the brown. And it goes to the one called lamp, which is all the way up here. And then the final connection on this entire board is going to be the white green and that is going to go to the hold. Now this one's got a little more wire than I like to see, so I'm going to snip that off. To finish up this wiring, we're going to have to wire a ground and a 12 volt positive to the relay board. And if you follow the wiring color coding, that's going to be an orange and a red. And I didn't have any pure red, so I just have this kind of faded red wire here. And we're going to get this hooked up here. So the red's going to go to the 12 volt here. And that's going to go up to E2 on the speech network board. And then the ground. And that goes to the G terminal on the speech network board. So that finishes up the wiring on the local phone boards. And now you could go through and you could check continuity on these here to make sure they all connect. But this finishes up the phone board right here. Now it's time to set up the cup hook and the handset. And for that, what's supplied with this one here is the cup hook itself, this handset, and then this white LED. And this LED is what indicates that the dispatcher is trying to contact the phone. And there's several different places you could mount this. You can mount this on the layout fascia, but I'm going to try to do a complete one unit install. So I want to have this light be in the cup hook. And then I also want the cable of the phone handset to be attached to my cup hook. That way this is just one unit that I can install over on the layout. Now you could also have a hole in the layout fascia where this goes through, and then this would connect to your phone board that I'd set up earlier. But I'm going to drill a hole in the side of this here, and you can see I've clipped off the ends because I used them earlier over on the phone board. And then so I've clipped these off, and again, you don't have to. If you left those ends on there, you can just plug those right into that speech network board. But I'm going to drill a hole, feed these through, and then I'm going to extend them with some wire along with another Cat5. Now, if you had a multi-conductor wire cable, something like a, like a 10, 12, whatever, you could make one cable. I don't have that, and I don't have a long enough run to justify buying a whole nother set of wire. So I'm using what I have here, and there's going to be the Cat5 that will go for the cup hook, and it will have one extra color. The green won't be used. And then I have this additional 4 conductor wire that will be what I'm going to use to extend my my handset. Now the handset is a red, black, yellow, green, and all I have is a red, black, green, white. So my white and my yellow are going to be connected together, but that's okay. I can label that on my phone board. I'm sure that in the future, if I couldn't remember and I hooked up every single wire, all that would be left would be a white wire. I'm pretty sure I could guess that it went to the yellow wire. So the first thing I'm going to do here for this is to do a slight modification on this. And I already know that I want my phone cable to come out actually on this side here. So it'd be on this side. And I did have a label maker that I put a label in here and labeled the connections on the back of the switch here. So this is going to be the white, green, the orange, the white orange, the blue, and the white blue, and this one here is not used. Then I'm going to have to bring in the LED in here, and you could put it anywhere you want in here. Because my fascia has kind of an edge in some places, I decided to not put it in the top. The manual shows it a simple hole being drilled here and it being right in here, which would be good if your fascia is low, but in many places my fascia is high, and again, like I said, I have an edge here that I'm putting it under, so I'm going to put it in the face here. And I'm going to use one of these screw posts here to actually run the LED into, and use that as a retainer as well. The unit here, you can screw it to your layout with these two posts here. You could use these as well. They're probably overkill. So what I did is I took a piece of my scrap plywood there, and I made a drilling template, and I made this line here square to the edge and the top here, so when I go to the layout I can stick this on here and use a level to make sure my cup hook is straight on there, and hold this on there and drill the two mounting holes, and this would be the wire hole for my cable to come through, which brings it through right about in the middle here. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to drill the 3mm hole for the LED, and I've chosen this hole here because it puts it in right about there. This other hole, the outer hole here, kind of puts it right here, and I figured that being in this space works out a lot better. So I'll go ahead and simply just drill a 3mm hole. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight metric drill set. Works good for the plastic stuff here. So you can see where that put that hole right there. Now, that's a pretty deep spot, so if you try to put the LED in there, it's going to, of course, not go all the way through. So what I did is I just simply took the 3mm drill bit out, and you can stick it in the back here and get an idea where it's going to come through here. And then you can grab it with your hand, or you can just grab it with something, and I'm going to just use this paint tweezers here. And so that's how deep that is. Now I'm going to use a 4.5mm drill bit for the to widen out so that the base of the LED can go in there, and you can use your drill here to get the depth here. Now what I found that actually works well for me is I just got a piece of scrap tubing. This happens to be brass, but it could be plastic. It could be a little smaller. If an ideal situation would be just a little smaller to slip over this bigger drill bit. I'm going to put the 4.5mm drill bit in my drill, and I'm going to slide this tube on here, and I'm going to use this gauge here to get an idea of how deep I want that to go. And now it's better to do this in 2 steps if you have to. So if I were to tighten this in here and drill that hole, you can see that it will not poke through the handset. The tube will bottom out and stop on there. So if I were to now drill this in here, and now I stick the LED in the base here, you'll see that it'll run up against that and stop. Now the LED would be just fine sitting in there like that, and you could put something in the hole there to hold it, and then just run your wires up and bend these over. Or you could do, if you want to make sure they stay separate in there and not touch each other, is you can take a Dremel with a cutoff wheel and just make a couple little slots in this base. Now you can see I had to go in at an angle, but that's okay. They'll still work. And then just get rid of the melted plastic in there. Okay, next I'm going to drill the hole for the handset cable to come through, and I'm going to drill it right here. And I'm going to tell you from experience, I've had bad luck with the plastic grabbing the drill bit and pulling it into these contacts here and slightly damaging them. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this out quick. and then I'll drill the hole here. And this is a 5mm drill bit. You can see how that just pulled that. It would have pulled it right into that switch assembly there. Switch is out. I'm gonna go ahead and feed my handset cable in here. And so the 5mm is a really tight fit in here. And so you kind of have to work this in here. And I'm gonna bring it in, you know, a little ways here. We can get rid of this little label on there. And to make a strain relief on there, I'm just gonna use a zip tie. This cable can just come up, you know, maybe about that far, so we can pull this out a little ways. Actually, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep that in there, and then we're gonna pull this zip tie real tight. And we want this pretty tight because we want it to kind of dig into that cable there. And then we're gonna clip off the tail there. Then we can pull that so that bottoms out on there. Then this handset cable, I'm just gonna run up and just tuck it in real nice behind that screw post. And then we'll put the switch assembly back in there. Okay, so the switch is working, the cable's in here. I'm gonna strip the ends of these wires off, and then I'll solder on my extension cable on here. Okay, I have extended my handset cable, and I've added a heat shrink on those. And we'll just set this out of the way. And the next thing we're gonna do here is add the Cat 5 cable that's gonna go to the switch and the LED. I've cut back the ends of this cable and stripped the ends of the wires that we're gonna be using. The green is not gonna be used. I simply wrapped mine around the end. You could clip it off, but I'm leaving it there just in case, you know, for some strange reason I might wanna add something in the future. So I'm gonna go ahead and follow the label I made in here to go white, green, orange, white, orange, blue, and white, blue. And I'm gonna make those solder joints in there. I've cut some short pieces of heat shrink here that can go back over the edge. Since these contacts are fairly close in here, by putting these putting the heat shrink tubing on here, soldering it, and then sliding this over the terminal, it'll protect those, especially those two inner ones there, from touching each other. I also have some really small diameter heat shrink that's going to go for the LED for the same reason as well. We don't want anything to cross up or squeeze up when we go to put this in the layout, because we might be on the back side pulling these wires. But you'll see I'm also going to put a strain relief on here that will help to not pull these wires through the hole in the fascia. So I've got the Cat 5 cable soldered up to the switch, and I've got the heat shrink on there. It's a pretty tight space. When you have if you're gonna do the hole in the side of the cup hook here, you could take the switch out, or you could take the switch out. It's a very robust assembly, and then you could solder all these on there outside of this plastic area here, because it's kind of far down in there, and then just simply put the switch back in. And while I was at it, I soldered on the LED here. Now the brown wire goes to the longer lead on the LED, and the white brown goes to the shorter one there. And then I put the heat shrink tubing on there. So the next thing I'm gonna do here is I'm actually just gonna use another zip tie and attach these two cables to each other. Now this is where, if you had the, you know, like a 10 or what would that be, like a 12 conductor cable would be a better choice here. But again, I don't want to buy another cable just for the few installations I have, so I'm just going to zip tie these two together here. Now that will be the strain relief. So when I drill the hole in the layout, I'm going to drill it the diameter just big enough to put these through, and then this will not be able to pull through. And then I'm going to just try to be neat about the wiring in here. And so this is what will go into the layout here. Now, all I have to do is fish this LED in the hole here, and then I'm going to run the leads in those slots that I'd cut. And it gets a little tricky here to maneuver all this, but we can push the LED all the way down in there, making sure it's outside the front, and then just stick our wires in those little slots. And then I'm simply going to use just a piece of strip wood. This was actually square strip wood that I cut the corners off. I'm just going to jam it down in the hole there and push it tight. And that will hold the LED in the face. So now I'm going to go ahead and build all my assemblies of these, so they are all ready to go, but this finishes up the cup hook. Once I had all the phone stations constructed, now I have to hook them up to kind of the main controller here, and that's this item right here. This is where all the phone Cat5 cables will be run back to, and there's 4 wires coming out of each of those phone stations that have to connect to these 4 sets of terminals. The 5th wire actually connects to a momentary button that is used to alert the stations that the dispatcher wants to contact those wherever those phones are. And that simply has a wire running from a momentary button back to ground. So what you do is you just, that momentary contact grounds out that button and makes the LED and the buzzer activate at each phone. So this one here, this is what's called the battery feed. This is what basically powers the telephone system. These 2 items I'm going to locate next to each other. This one here is really like the dispatcher location phone type. If you were going to call this a phone station, this would be the dispatcher's phone. Now this can be located next to these 2 here, but what I have on mine is I am going to have 5 phone systems. So I'm going to have 5 Cat5 wire cables coming back to this box here. And my dispatcher location is about 25 feet from the layout. But because I have to go up over a door and back down, you're really talking more like 35 feet of cable. So rather than running 5 35-foot cables, I'm going to run 1 35-foot cable to connect this panel here to this dispatcher phone, and then an additional cable that has the button grounds to come back to here. Or well, technically there's 1 ground going to where my dispatcher is and 5 coming back to ground out to here. It still makes more sense for me to separate this board from these 2 and save the extra 3 cables that I would need to run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these under the layout, and then I'm going to run 2 cables from the area that I have these over to this box or this board here. So what I decided to do was to quickly make up a box to put these 2 in, and then another box that has the buttons to put this in. And I just used some scrap lumber I had laying around. So I'm going to screw these into that box that's going to go into the layout. And then I had a bunch of Cat5 plugs here from another project that I'm going to put in that box, and then I'm going to put a plug on the end of each one of my cables coming from my phone location cables. So here's the box I constructed. It's simply made up of 1x2 boards for the sides. This is a piece of plywood for the back and a 1/2-inch piece of plywood for the bottom. And then I left some openings here, and these are just some wall plates I got from a big box store that these cables can plug into. This is a piece of the track screwed to the back here that I can put the panels into, so we can just simply snap these into those tracks. And then I'm going to use some terminal strips over here to bring all the phone lines. They're going to be the locations for the buttons, so I can screw the the cable that's going to be coming back from the dispatcher will be coming through here and going to these terminal strips, which will then be the ones that ground out to the ground here. So the first wire I put in here was just the ground wire, and this is going to go to all the buttons for every station. So when the button's pushed, of course, it sends the ground signal. So this terminal here will end up going back out over to the dispatcher. And then I made up a simple little plug with all the colors, and I'm going to use the same color codings for the ground. So the white brown will be connected to here, which will be the ground for all buttons. And then every other color on here will go to, there'll be 5 colors I'll pick out here that'll go to the momentary buttons. Okay, I thought I'd show you this before it got more wires in here, but this is the one it's plugged in now to the receptacle plate, and then it runs up through the middle here, and every color is just connected to a terminal strip. So when each phone line from each telephone location comes in, those cables will come in from some of these remaining ones. 4 of those wires will connect up here, and 1 of the brown-white wires will connect to each one of these. So these colors really don't matter over here as long as you keep track of where they go to your button stations. So, these will be all brown whites going to these terminals here. I'll put one in and we'll take a look at how it goes. Here we can see I've got one of the phone lines put in. So this is going to be the receptacle that's going to be coming back from one of the phone stations. And it comes in here, and I've got the white-blue wire connected up here to the tip, the blue wire to the ring connection, the brown wire connected over here to the 12-volt positive, and then the solid orange wire is connected here to the ground. And I wrote those colors on here just so I have future reference of what's going on here. Now the white-brown wire that's coming from the phone station, it came around here and it went into this first terminal here, and it's connected over here to the brown wire. So when I trace back here to my plug that's going back to my dispatcher location, white-brown will call this phone plug right here. And what's nice about that is I can wire this all up, and then I can either change the connection in here if I want the phones in a different order, or I can just plug in the phone coming from a phone station to whichever one I want the order to be in over at the control panel. I don't have to really keep track of where those colors go. The only one I really have to keep track of is that this white-brown one is connected to all the buttons, and then all of these colors coming back are connected to another button independently. The next thing we're going to have to do is I'm going to have to, after I finish up the other 4 of these, is that I'm going to have to put a jumper between here and here, which I was supplied with a short little jumper wire or jumper connector right here that I'll put in. And then I'm going to have to make up a cable that goes from here, which only uses 4 wires. It uses the ring, tip, ground, and 12 volt. Now you can see I have all the incoming phone lines wired up in here, and it looks a little bit messy here, but there'll be a cover over the top of this. And what I've done here is on the end, I've labeled what's going to be going where here. So this is going to be going back to the what's labeled as ATSN, and that's the board here that's back at the dispatcher. And then this will be also the cable going back to the buttons to call the different phone lines. And from here over, these are the different phone lines, and I've numbered them 1 through 6, even though I'm only going to be using 1 through 5. So in here, all the white-blue wires coming from the phones over here go here, and I put them in a logical order. So this is going to be the ground that grounds out all the buttons, and then this is line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Over here, since this line that comes down here from the call buttons actually has the ability to have 7, I did wire the green and white up in here just to keep them, going somewhere. And I may use those in the future. I don't know. So at least this this receptacle is completely wired up. In here you can see coming back from each phone line. So for example, this is a good one to see here. So this is phone 3. I left the orange or the white orange and the 2 green ones a little long and wrapped them around the end in case there's a feature someday I want to add. I've got this going all the way to each phone. Might as well take advantage of that if I ever need that someday. So I left enough there to use those. Then the white, blue, the orange, and the brown are all wired in. And the way I've done this to keep track of this is, for example, this terminal, this is the ground, and this is phone line 1. If I were to put a little jumper across here, it would make phone number 1 beep and the LED would light up. So that's a good test here. I can test these all right here. Since this is phone line 1, it's the second terminal over. On every one of these strips here, the second terminal over is phone line 1. So this is the orange of phone line 1. That's the brown of phone line 1. That's the white blue of phone line 1 and the blue of phone line 1. Now before I put this under the layout, I'm going to check the continuity of each one of these phone lines to verify that I have them, all the receptacles wired correctly. And you can see I've had this little plug I made here with just some wires sticking out of the end of it so I can do testing with them. Now I did follow a standard for all of these here, and I can put that on the screen and show you what my color pinout, my color coding for the pinout is. So I'm going to put we're not using the white, orange, and the green ones, so I just move those to the side. But I'm going to go through here and I'm going to check these. Now, because I followed a numbering system here, being phone line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and phone line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can simply come in here, touch the orange one here, and then find my orange wire here. And I should be able to get some continuity here. So I don't know if you could hear that, see that, but this one did check out okay. And I could just simply come across and do every one of these and verify there's no errors. Now, because I followed the same numbering here, that this being 1 or ground and 1, this is the ground here. So if I were to verify this is connected and then connected here, and then I'll be able to come over here on my call line out, which should be a white brown. If I test the white brown here, and then all the way back to here, I have my ground connected correctly. So I'm going to go and verify all the phone lines right now to make sure those are all done, and then I'm going to put the cable in here for the ATSN connection. So the last thing I have to do before I close up this box is I have to run this phone line here over to the dispatcher center. And I want to use Cat5 cable because it's all I have actually, and I only have the RJ45 connectors. And there are no places around here for me to pick up any kind of conversion jacks or anything. So the simplest thing for me to do was just to cut one of these phone lines and then find the conversion for going from an RJ11 to an RJ45, and I'll show you the conversion here on the screen. But basically what's happening here is that if you look back here on this panel here, they're labeled what the pinouts are on it, and the colors on the end of the phone line go as follows: that the 24 volt is the white wire, the ground is the blue wire, the tip is the red wire, and the ring is the green wire. And then so to follow a standard RJ45 wiring, what I've got is I've got the red soldered to the blue, the green is soldered to the white blue, the white is soldered to the green, and then the blue is soldered to the white green. And then of course I use my little short plug tester here to check the continuity from these pins back here to these. Now you could solder to these if you wanted to, but again, I want to make a plug and play type system out of this, and this just worked out better for me. So now I'm going to go ahead and stick this in the end here, and that should wrap up this. Now, one other thing is you have to have a 24 volt supply coming in right here. And I don't have a male and a female end yet. I'm gonna get one of those, but for now, all I did is I just drilled a hole over here in the side of my box. I'm gonna run my power adapter in and plug it in here and get a cable made for that in the future. But this is gonna get me going out with what I have here. Now everything is installed in my phone box here, and I've got the cable that's going to the ATSN board put in here, and my soldered connections. Again, you know, there's probably connectors that convert over, but I just made this one up in here, and it comes out here, and I verified the continuity with my small little test plug. Then I also made the cable here that goes back to that board, and I plugged it in to this jack on the ATSN board. And if you look back here, there's pads back here, and then I verified the continuity between the pads on the board back here to the board over here, just to make sure again that my wiring was all correct. And then I made a really long cable that would go all the way over to my dispatcher center. The next cable I made is the one that connects up the phone buttons, and that's simply another piece of Cat5 with a plug on it. And then on the other end of that, it's got this kind of crazy connection of momentary buttons. And the way they work is, here's the ground, the white blue is the ground, and it's tied to every single button. And then I just went through with the colors on this terminal strip here and connected them to one other button. And then I went through and I verified that all those connections came back to here and checked out okay. Now temporarily, I'm just gonna make a panel and put all these buttons in it. And then I'm gonna mount this board to that same panel. But I think in the future, I've already got plans. I'm probably going to 3D print some kind of enclosure. Here we can see one of the phone stations installed under the layout. We have the Cat5 cable that is coming from the TCB board. And then this is the one up here coming from the cup hook. And then there's another one right here that's coming from the handset. So I have them all attached. The board is attached to the layout. And then we'll go back and follow this cable back. I suggest as you put these in, you label the other end what town it is, so that you know when you get all the way over to the part where you're going to plug it into the TCB, you know which phone you're going to be plugging in. So here's the phone system installed under the layout, and I put the cover on the box here. And underneath it, we've got all the lines coming from the different phone stations. And then these are the two lines. The blue one is the one that goes to the ATSN board, and then this is the one that has all the buttons to activate each phone station. Here's my temporary dispatcher setup. I just have this headset here with the microphone on it for the dispatcher right at the moment. The ATSN board is screwed down to the top of this wooden box here. Here you can see the button with all the locations of the phones labeled on there. And this little jumper wire on here is to set the microphone to always be on for the dispatcher. But if you take this off, you can put a push to talk button on there. And then you can see some settings over here. Eventually, like I said, I want to make a better box for this and maybe a cover for this. But for now, this will just get me started. The cables here go over to the TCB board.